Good afternoon from Ottawa. Today I have we'll have a discussion with MP Stephanie Kusie from Calgary Midnapore, the MP there. Also the Shadow Minister for a Treasury Board. MP Kusie and the team been very busy on the federal procurement and the problems and the scandals we're having on the ArriveScam and many other files regarding the federal procurement. There is definitely signs of corruption and signs of mismanagement. So today I thought it would be a terrific discussion to welcome MP Kusie because she's got big hand on this file, and to talk about this and to inform Canadians about what's going on in this area, because I'm sure everyone is hearing about the ArriveScam and the issues regarding this important file. So welcome, Stephanie, and the first question is, can you brief us on the updates on where the file is, what's going on with the investigation, and where the committee at?
Sure. No, and Ziad, thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to spend time with you. I really appreciate having you as my seatmate. And so I think it's fantastic that we're having this discussion here today, because it's really important for Canadians, and they certainly will want to listen up and they'll want to know more about ArriveScam, because it's their money that's being wasted essentially with ArriveScam. So ArriveScam is an app that was supposed to cost $80,000, a small amount of money to assist in the pandemic. And for a long time, we thought that the cost was $54 million. That's crazy. That's over 700 times more than the original cost, so a significant increase. But the week before last, the report from the Auditor General came out, and it's actually cost more, like $60 million, $60 million. But the Auditor General isn't even sure, because the documentation behind ArriveScam is so bad, she's not even sure that $60 million is the full amount.
So it could be more.
It could be more. It could be more. And at the center of this scandal is a two-person company called GC Strategies. It's two individuals who work out of their basement. Originally, we thought that GC Strategies got paid $11 million. That's a lot of money for two people working out of their basement, who, I should add, don't actually do the work on the application. They subcontract people to do work on the application. But we found out in the Auditor General's report that it's actually $19 million that this duo received. So if ever we're done with politics, you and I can set up a consulting firm and make $19 million for an app. But we wouldn't do that, because we're not like this Liberal government that has no respect for taxpayer
value.
Like
if someone to win the jackpot just like that, by sitting in the basement and buying one ticket, I mean, it's just unbelievable. Because, you know, I'm familiar with the past procurement with the federal government in my past life, and I know that the system was supposedly to be very transparent and very open especially when the bids are there. And we always used to see some signs of somebody writing the contract, somebody putting together the conditions to be the sole source, so no others can even enter to the contract. So will be definitely the level of transparency in this case is very low, if none, probably. And I think all I can see from this, hearing that something that's supposed to cost $80,000 now costing maybe 80 million. Now 60 million is a number that is not confirmed, but that means it's not confirmed that it's going to be lower. Its expectation is going to be much higher. And can anyone imagine that you can buy something for $1 and all of a sudden you spend $750 for the same item you can buy? That's how simple this can be.
That's right.
So where are we going from here? Like, I mean, the investigation is going. I think there's more than one side that are doing the investigation. How are we going to make sure that Canadians get basically that corruption to stop? And the money has to return back to Canadians, because that's their money, to taxpayers, and somebody has to be accountable for that.
You're right. And there is no end of organizations and individuals that would like to look into ArriveScam. So, for example, we had the Procurement Ombudsman release a report on ArriveScam, and his report was damning. It was that procurement strategy was not followed, or procedure was not followed at all. Same with the Auditor General in her report. In her report, she even determined that there was $12.2 million, which might have not even been spent on the application itself. And she also determined, to your point about who does the work, there were actually task authorizations, so write-ups for jobs that were paid that they don't even know who did the work because there's no documentation saying who did the work or if it got done. And also relative to your point about knowing about procurement and sort of meeting the requirements to get the contract, that's another special thing about ArriveScam is that GC Strategies actually wrote the rules for one of the contracts so that they could win it. So, I mean, there are so many people who are looking into this report. I'll also add that the CBSA, Canada Border Services Agency, their integrity director internally, he's doing a report, or I should say he did a report, but that's the government investigating themselves. But great news today, Ziad, the RCMP actually made an announcement that they are going to do a full investigation into ArriveScam.
That's what needed, because if you think about the process, okay, someone wrote the conditions of the contract to basically eliminate every competition to be a sole source contract to one company.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's one aspect of it. The other aspect, there's $12 million that nobody knows what kind of services were provided for $12 million. Can we see the invoices on that? Do you see who authorized the payment? And how much have they been, how many hours of work? Because there really no material involved in this.
Right.
It's very little, if any. Okay, the raw material cost is probably next to nothing. Just all that labor and consultation and whatever. But how much they bill per hour, how many hours they spend. If you think about $12 million, it's a lot of money. You can ship tons of product with $12 million. I used to be in the business where I would probably ship 200 containers for $12 million.
Wow.
So here's what happened. This is a company in the basement with 2 employees, or 2 whatever owners call them. And then they bill $12 million that we don't know what the money was, why they billed this much, and who really authorized the payment. In this case, I have a question that we've received from an audience. And Lori Enright says, and I quote, "I have watched committee meeting after committee meeting shut down because of unfavorable questions. This is a waste also of taxpayer money, and is there a way to change this? Why do the Liberals waste so much time in committee if this was truly just a mistake by someone in the public service?" It's a very logical question, expected to come from the public, and I'm sure there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Canadians are watching this, and they're trying to follow up on this. So how would you answer Lori Enright concern?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say hello to Lori, and I'd like to thank her very much for the question. And I'm very glad to hear that Lori is following the committee meetings because, as I said, I think that there's very important lessons in here for Canadians on how the government is inappropriately spending their money. And, you know, we talked about GC Strategies. It was actually reported that GC Strategies has had up to $250 million in contracts with this government.
With 2 people.
Yes, with 2 people. $250 million. And I think in that answer lies the answer to Lori's question, and that is this government wants to cover up as much as they possibly can because of the incredible waste, because of the incredible mismanagement. And this is just one example of that. Another example is that the Auditor General determined that the per diem rate of ArriveScam was $1,700 compared to, that's right, correct, compared to $700 in other IT positions within the government. I mean, that's insane. That's twice as much, almost 3 times as much, getting close to 3 times, 2.5 for sure. So to answer Lori's question, it's because this government is acting unethically. They have no value, or excuse me, no respect for the value of money for the taxpayer. And this is why when you have a government that doesn't care, it doesn't matter to them what they pay to their Liberal friends and insiders. I'm sure you also know, Ziad, that contracting, external contracts, rather than using our public service, our public servants, is up 60% with this government over the last 9 years. And so they're just handing out money to their friends and insiders.
Absolutely.
So it's a cover-up, to answer Lori's question.
So a scandal like this sitting on three legs. First, the government.
Right.
Second is the supplier, like GC Strategy in this specific case, and there could be other cases, which
Right.
is, I believe that there will be other cases.
Yes.
And third is the CBSA, which is the agency who authorized and worked with GC Strategy to put this application in use for the CBSA, which is Canada Border and Service Agencies. So seems like this is a perfect storm, or something like systematic corruption that is happening, because it takes more than one side to create something like this that costing $60+ million to Canadian taxpayers, away from people that lining up in for food in the food banks and on the street trying to dig into dumpsters for food. So to me, if this is a new norm, that means we have a systemic corruption in the country. And if this is a new norm, we are in a very, very dangerous path to fall in the categories of third world, maybe fourth world countries, where these things become the new norm and everybody talk about it and no one do anything about it. So where are we at, and how are we going to continue to go after this to make sure we get to the bottom of it and get back the standard, the proper ethic in the process, the transparency needed in such a process to make sure we preserve the Canadians' right money and the process that we will always maintain to and protect.
And that's a very good question, Ziad. And I think the reality is that we need a Conservative government led by Pierre Poilievre. We need a government who will respect the taxpayer and understand how hard it is to earn a dollar. You know, as a business person, how hard it is to earn a dollar. I come from a small business family. I saw how hard my parents worked to earn a dollar, and we have lost all sight of that within this current government. So I think that's definitely the first thing. And within that government, we will have ministers who take responsibility. That's another thing that we see within ArriveScam, is that no minister is willing to take responsibility. They are attempting to pass it down to the line to their deputy ministers, who are failing them terribly when they come to committee to respond to our questions. It just seems to be a cascade of mismanagement, that there is no one responsible. So I think that we will have a government that respects the taxpayer dollar. We will have ministers who take responsibility. And I think that we will also evaluate procurement laws and regulations at that time, because currently there's some incredible gaps that allowed this to happen. And finally, and just as important, we will have a government that demands that these rules are followed, that these procedures are followed, because it's evident from all of the reports I listed earlier that these procedures aren't being followed. So I think it starts with the government, down to the ministers, down to the procedural aspects, the laws, and then the application of them, making sure that they are followed, so that fundamentally we have a government that cares about how every dollar is spent by the government, off the backs of hardworking Canadians, because both you and I know how hard it is to make a dollar.
You know what I felt after 2015, coming from the business world, that there's a big deal of mismanagement and carelessness for the public fund, or for the public purse, as we say, with this government. Now, we know that that pandemic have made the situation worse, and there's a lot of exploitation, can I call it, and taking advantage of the crisis for the government not to care too much about how much they spend, for some industries or some companies that they don't, they took advantage, they find a great opportunity to basically take money that doesn't belong to them, or take advantage of this, of providing some services with hundreds of times more of the cost of a normal service. Now, in that case, we have also the contract that we extended to Medcago to produce some vaccines, $300 million. That is the unofficial number. It also could be more than that. Also, that fall into the procurement side of the world. So again, on this thing, where are we at? Are we going to chase this? Are we chasing this to the end? And how your team is handling this at committee?
And you make a very good point, Ziad, and that is that ArriveScam is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the waste and mismanagement of this government. And I always say as well that ArriveScam is a microcosm of everything that is wrong with this government. And we can see it expanded with GC strategies to that $250 million. But I do think that there will come a time where we evaluate all aspects of spending during the pandemic, including the one you just mentioned. I'll bring, for example, a motion that was just passed in our last government operations meeting on evaluating the documentation and the expenditures of the COVID Alert app. I mean, this is another application that the Liberals brought forward during the pandemic. And if the findings are anywhere near ArriveScam, I think we've got another scandal on our hands. So, ArriveScam, the COVID Alert app, the Medicago, I mean, these are all mismanagement, misuse of funds. And fortunately, we as Conservatives are committed to getting to the bottom of these scandals, and I see this as just another one on the list, really, frankly.
On the same point,
yes.
Our leader Pierre Poilievre, in our approach to financing and to handling the public purse, is to find a $1 saving in order to spend $1 on a program, which is a way that is a safe way to go through to make sure that you don't spend where you should be able to look at where you can save, and make that balance in order to bring some responsibility into handling the public purse. Because anyone can easily spend, but someone has to pay. Now, politicians, if they're not careful, if they're not competent, if they don't know what they're doing, and if they're careless, they can go spend all the money, and they brag, as this government do, about how much they spend. But they never talk about the bottom line. They never talk about what they brought with the amount of money they spend, with $50 billion now interest on the public debt, which is crazy. I mean, even a nightmare to even think about it, where it was below $10 billion prior to 2015. Now we're looking at another $50 billion, almost more or equal to the health transfers from the federal government to all the provinces, where every sector is in need of money, and this government doing nothing but continue to print and spend money without having to look at how much they can save, where they can save, and make this operation as much lean in operation, so at least can be self-sustainable in a way to continue to be dependent and balanced. I mean, at the end of the day, no one talking about balanced budgets become like a dirty word with this government. So also a highlight on the approach of our leader, Pierre Poilievre, on this, when we form government, how we're going to do this, and how we can make a difference by bringing a different way to look to handle the public purse and the Canadian finance.
And you're absolutely correct. I mean, if we look at the report that came out last week, we have a $23.6 billion deficit last year from April to December alone, $23.6 billion. So as you mentioned at the start of our discussion, I am the shadow minister for the Treasury Board. My counterpart, the minister, the president of the Treasury Board, Anita Anand, she dedicated, when she got the role last summer, to find $15 billion over 3 years. $15 billion over 3 years when they just have a deficit in less than 1 year of $23.6 billion. So I think when we have a Conservative government under Pierre Poilievre, we're going to see a real respect for money once again. And you talked about the pay-as-you-go system. I think that's absolutely a fantastic thing to do, a thing we absolutely have to do. But another thing I'd really be committed to doing and interested in doing is overhauling the public accounts. I think Canadians don't necessarily understand where their money is going right now. True. When we get the estimates, the supplementary estimates as were released last week, you can't as a Canadian look at that and be like, oh, so the however many hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands or thousands of dollars I paid in tax, they can't determine where that money went. So I think in addition to, as we saying, axing the tax, cutting the budget, building the homes, and stopping the crime. Well, cutting the budget, that's a big part of it, bringing it back to balance. But, I just think that we're going to have an absolute different approach. And I think it's important as well that Canadians understand where their money goes, because it's their money.
100%. We are the politician. We're the one in the parliament here, and we're doing this on a daily basis. And the amount of scandals and the amount of corruption that we see is all we do is trying to chase and investigate and go after these with all the tools we had or we have in our hand to make sure we bring reality and truth to Canadians. So because Canadian, at the end of the day, we are responsible to make sure we handle their business properly. This is our job, and I think this government have missed the mark when it comes to handling this job properly and be responsible and be careful over handling the business for Canada and Canadians. To that, I want to thank you for what you do. I think you're doing a good job. I'm proud of the team, and let's continue to highlight the problems, the scandals, and go after the people that takes advantage of our taxpayers to make sure we bring justice and transparency back to the procurement system in Canada, because that's a must. We must do that. It's very important to do so.
And I'm very proud to have you as a colleague, Ziad, and thank you so very much for inviting me to have this important discussion here today.
It was a pleasure. Thanks again.